What's up, guys? As you know, I've been traveling so much.
I'm a gamer, but that's just the beginning.
MetaQuest 3 just saved my plan.
I could have dropped my croissant.
Hi, let's check out UFC Fight Pass.
I can be any version of you. Did you know I rep sport fits too?
Man, I actually feel like I'm here.
Gotta have my coffee.
See how I pop my booty with my two-step.
Ooh, making it rain. Multiple vibes hit him. If you know, you don't.
Why would you even buy a VR headset in 2024? Why would you ever want to support this company? 6 years ago, I saw this video. Two friends playing as Rocket Raccoon and Doctor Strange fighting Thanos in virtual reality.
I gotta tell you.
Then I found out you could play as Spider-Man, Hulk, Black Panther, and basically the majority of the Avengers with up to 3 other players.
It was perfect.
That this game had graphics comparable to that of most modern video games.
Perfect.
That there were full-fledged first-person shooters with community-made content and active player base.
Everything.
An Oculus-funded virtual sport called Echo VR that held real-life competitive tournaments.
Down to the last
And that there was a yearly,
minute details.
in-person event that anyone could attend to watch the next generation of VR tech be unveiled called Oculus Connect. And that even Valve was producing their own VR headset and full-length Half-Life VR game. The VR industry's fuse was lit. And at a time where that fuse felt like it led to fireworks, I was sold immediately. Yet today, I can't fight Thanos with my friends. Meta shut it down. I can't play Echo VR because Meta bought the studio before shutting the game and the entire studio down. I can't attend Oculus Connect because Meta changed the name, made it invite only, and then made those who attend sign a non-disparagement agreement. The two men who were largely responsible for building the Oculus platform and ensuing golden age of VR that basically created everything Meta now tries to call their own were either fired for their political beliefs or left because they disagreed with the company's future outlook. Ironically, all these years later, I am fighting Thanos with my friends, just not in virtual reality. Meta now has a monopoly on the VR industry and bends everything and everyone to their will, buying VR studios to add to their infinity gauntlet before shutting down those that oppose them and rebranding others' products as their own when they can't buy them out, picking and choosing what does and doesn't go on their storefront while their own employees put their own games on the Quest store without the usual review, sidestepping the red tape and rules that all of the third-party developers are subject to. If I vocalize negative opinions surrounding the company or their products, they then intentionally bolster more positively speaking creators on their headset's explore page. They quite literally have the reality stone already, and they can bend everything you see through these lenses to their benefit and bias, stand in their path, and they'll turn you to fucking blocks. Meta now even fund their own VR YouTuber impersonators that essentially create positive MetaQuest content for them. I get flack for being the negative VR guy, and for good reason. Right now, there's just not a lot positive to talk about besides Batman Arkham VR, which, let's be honest, does actually look pretty as heck. Unless you're a PC gamer, in which case this is allegedly a poor person punching simulator. I can't wait. I could just choose to talk about the good stuff, but those who do not only seem to live in a pretty sad echo chamber where they have to pretend like they're enjoying Hitman 3 in VR after its 5th crash while running at 20 FPS, or acting like they actually care about update V69 adding the option to use a fucking stylus in VR. To me, acting like that this is fine dog meme is far scarier than just acknowledging the fact that what I thought was a fuse to fireworks is actually 1 to 100 megaton bomb. I've been the victim of bribery. I'll get onto that later. Before I go completely thermonuclear on this company, it would be irresponsible, manipulative, and dishonest of me to not properly distinguish what Meta has done to positively influence and support virtual reality as a platform. Before I do that, obligatory, I literally have to sit and meditate in the forest for a week to muster the autistic energy to produce a video script before spending another week sleeping on the floor like I'm on some Batman Sigma male type shit, editing in one of the most unstable editing softwares known to man before emerging with a, still, let's be honest, pretty mid-schizophrenically edited YouTube video, so I'd like and subscribe would go a long way in making me feel less alone. To be clear, my grievances with this company are current, as in, if they wake up tomorrow and decide to stop some of the vomit-inducing, dishonest, and manipulative, erratic behavior that they regularly engage in currently and decide to follow a path forward to good, I'd be making a video called Better Save VR in brackets I love you daddy Zuckerberg. Functionally, technically, undoubtedly, Meta pushed VR into mainstream adoption in 2020 with the Quest 2, its affordability, value for money, and ensuing advertising push. They began millions of dollars worth of funding for individual VR studios that otherwise likely wouldn't have survived without it. Meta was fully willing to take millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of losses because they believed in this medium in a way that many even today still do not. Zuckerberg himself does legitimately seem to care, but their company has ballooned to such an immeasurable size and is so entrenched with pandering to every person, political stance, content genre, and modern trend that their efforts so often feel disingenuous. Despite their largely delusional advertising department, Meta, on large, were a legitimately strong and good force for VR as a whole. I literally wouldn't have the channel that I have today without my dad, without this tech billionaire who took a leap. No, not that one. This one. Palmer King Lucky. The man who started it all when he was just 16, building his own VR headsets in his parents' garage. It took just 3 years before he had built the 6th generation of his VR headset, the Oculus Rift. He launched Oculus VR in 2012 and facilitated the launch through a Kickstarter campaign. John Carmack, famous for Doom and Quake, had previewed the headset and ultimately joined in 2013 as their CTO. Then in 2014, they sold to Facebook for $2 billion. But no longer the king of his castle, Palmer Luckey was promptly fired just 3 years later in 2017, allegedly due to his political stance, but realistically Facebook likely wanted him gone from the start. If I was to hazard a guess, his personal view for VR's future likely didn't align all that well with that of the multi-billion-dollar social media company's one. Then, in 2022, John Carmack stepped down from his consulting CTO position, stating that he worried of the fight with Meta. Allegedly, he wrote internal posts criticizing Zuckerberg and new CTO Andrew Bosworth's decision-making as they continued to burn billions in their Reality Labs division. But despite this, he ultimately states that no other company is better positioned to bring the value of VR to the world than Meta. And this really is the root of the problem. Even if you can argue that Meta are in fact ruining VR, they are simultaneously the ones maintaining it for a mainstream audience. So let me argue that point. VR was built on the back of the gaming industry. Most of you watching this video associate VR with gaming for good reason, something that Meta for the last 2 years has spent an immeasurable amount of money trying to change.
5 days into editing GetHip here, I couldn't figure out how to put the advertiser for this video into this video, so here it is just awkwardly fitted into this video, which interrupts the rest of the video.
Mannequin is a 2v3 hide-and-seek VR FPS who I hope won't be upset that I put their sponsor segment in a video where I literally shit on Meta for like 15 minutes straight. The developers also sent me this box of bribes. In it, a hat, a lanyard with my name on it, so when I have a schizophrenic episode, I still remember who I am. I played this game in its early alpha stages back in 2023 at their studios in Sweden. I wouldn't be doing this ad read if the game was ass. Mannequin is some of the most fun that I've had in VR in a very long time. One team plays as agents armed with pistols loaded with 3 shots and a radar to detect the opposite team playing as mannequins. They're essentially aliens that can take the form of any of the NPCs dotted around the map. It's an intense game of cat and mouse. It's also dirt cheap at just $20. Links to Mannequin are in the description down below. Please click it. I like this game and the developers behind it very much. And if you don't click the link, it'll look like this ad read was a massive waste of money, which, let's be honest, it might have been. In just a few years, we went from fighting Thanos with friends to doing our taxes in virtual reality. Even now, it still feels like Meta almost is embarrassed that people would want to use their headsets for, dare I say it, fun? It's actually astonishing how well Meta mirrors IOI Interactive from Ready Player One, and judging by their past behavior interfering with the flow of information on their own platforms such as Facebook in the past, what stops them from doing it here on a virtual reality-wide scale? To be clear, I think Zuckerberg, to his credit, does recognize a lot of this, and he seems legitimately regretful of his company's past interference in freedom of speech on their platforms. But unlike social media platforms that are run by multiple different competing companies, VR is almost exclusively exclusively dominated by just Meta. The temptation to become a totalitarian monopolistic force is infinitely more accessible to them at any given moment. In Ready Player One, the Oasis was an open source virtual utopia. IOI claiming control of that would result in that ceasing. This was the primary existential threat for the entire movie. Except here, IOI is already in control of almost everything. I'm not the only one concerned by this. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission attempted to block Meta's purchase of VR fitness app developer Within, over fears that Meta's continued acquisition of VR studios would result in a completely Meta-dominated space that's devoid of natural competition between companies, stating that they believe Meta is attempting to essentially buy their way to the top. Meta has shown clearly in the past they also have little care for the protection of old media, literally deleting entire games and communities off of the face of these headsets when they don't generate enough revenue to justify their expense. It's one thing to shut servers down, and I think most of us can at least understand that position. That happens consistently with old flat screen games, but most of those old flat screen games have a single player component or physical copies. Meta are literally deleting a game's entire existence because it never existed physically to begin with is an entirely different level of media desecration that Meta has shown themselves more than willing to engage in multiple times. Meta has literally blatantly deleted single-player experiences that didn't require an online connection, that didn't require servers. Marvel Powers United, they snapped it. Pogo, snap. Dead and Buried, snap. Echo VR, Dance Central, Jurassic World, Alt Space, amongst a litany of others. It's crushing to see these experiences, many of which did have single-player components and offline modes, snapped to dust like this. In a medium where Meta expects us to purchase digital goods in, what happens to the value of those goods, the value of art? Does any of it even mean anything when it's at the behest of a multi-billion-dollar social media company with their cursor over the delete button? Their treatment of independent VR studios is also highly questionable. I want to lead into this by saying that I know some developers personally who have worked directly with Meta and have nothing but good things to say. They've received the support they need, the promotion they need, and the technical assistance. So I don't exactly understand why these instances went so wrong. In 2021, Meta acquired Downpour Interactive, the studio behind Onward. Within just 2 years, the CEO of the studio, Dante Buckley, left, with his statements seemingly hinting at struggles with Meta having at least something to do with his departure. In 2020, Meta acquired Ready at Dawn, the developers behind Lone Echo 1 and 2, along with Echo VR. By 2023, Meta had shut down Echo VR, citing lack of players as its reasoning for shutdown, despite technically it being one of the most played titles on the platform, and was definitely more f***ing played than Horizon f***ing Worlds. And then by 2024, Meta has now shut down the entire studio. Not to mention purchasing Sanzero Games, paying them to produce Marvel Powers United, and then just shutting down the game a few years later. Meta actually so far has only produced 2 new games from their 8 different VR studios that they purchased. Asgard's Wrath 2 from Sanzero Games and Batman Arkham VR from Camouflage. The other 6 studios have either produced nothing or have been shut down entirely. But what happens to all of the studios that they can't buy? In 2019, YourFit released a fitness tracking app for VR. According to its founder, Meta had attempted to poach their CTO on 4 different occasions, before then breaking his app repeatedly, and then ultimately just making their own version of the app titled Oculus Move, utilizing an almost identical layout to Your. Six, the founder of Your, in a Twitter thread detailed that to have an app accepted on the Quest Store to begin with, you must be approved via a green light process. You must hit specific set requirements along with submitting a multi-year business plan to Meta. He points out that Meta has full access to that plan and can pass it around internally, meaning that they can essentially just use the information submitted by other developers trying to get onto the store to just create their own versions of their products. 6 also highlights that the head of the Quest Store has sidestepped Meta's own app requirements and has put his own games on the Quest Store along with promoting them on the Quest's homepage, despite the games clearly lacking the user reviews to justify being put on the Quest Store to begin with. Bear in mind, Gorilla Tag, the most successful VR title of all time, was unable to acquire Quest Store access 4 years. Major disclaimer here, to 6's discredit, Meta last month officially dissolved App Lab, meaning that early access applications and apps produced by third-party developers prior to getting Quest Store approval that were previously hidden from the main store and relegated to Meta's App Lab, like Gorilla Tag was for years, are now merged with the full Quest Store named the Horizon Store, meaning that they now appear in search and on the store alongside fully released Meta-made applications. This is indicative of a major shift in Meta's ideology, making their company and their VR platform far more open, far more like the Oculus of old, the Oculus of Palmer Luckey. And while 6 isn't wrong about his previous remarks, and a lot of this still holds some level of ground, this store change should prevent Meta from engaging in a lot of that past behavior and should ultimately empower a lot of third-party developers far more than they were previously. But like any authority or system ran by individual people with their own biases, political beliefs, and personal downfalls, naturally these seep their way into these systems and rot out their integrity from the inside. This is bad enough as it is with government organizations, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, and so on, but with an entire reality, an entire virtual reality that we're expected to work, game, and socialize in, handing the power of God to these people who won't even abide by their own rules is a terrifying prospect.
That's life.
That's life.
Funding and passion. This is what remains despite the crippling shortcomings surrounding Meta's VR endeavors. There are still countless developers pouring their heart and soul into great VR experiences that, coupled with Meta's funding, provided you meet all their criteria and they don't coincidentally copy your entire business plan and app idea, does produce some truly incredible VR content. Ultimately, I hope that most of you understand the point that I'm trying to make here. I and millions of others, including probably many of you, bought VR headsets over the last few years for one thing: fun. This medium excels at fun. The best of VR understands this impeccably. Half-Life Alyx understood this, Boneworks understood this, Gorilla Tag understands this. The fact that we're a decade since the original rift into this tech and have only seen a handful of these examples concerns me greatly. And I worry that Meta, with their exhaustive focus on work-oriented content and truly astonishingly out-of-touch marketing division, don't understand that this should be a fun-first device. I hope we see a strong pivot back to not just gaming at Facebook Connect this year, but fun. I want to see this platform used for good, a medium for inspiration, connection, and really just sex with Hitler 2016. It's literally fine.